What's up, PGF Nation? We're back with NFL Week 2, College Football Week 3 takeaways. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Today, we're going to talk about the Cowboys' defense getting shredded. Mahomes and his offense is still struggling. Trevor Lawrence is in trouble. What's wrong with Arch Manning? Plus, Georgia-Tennessee in an overtime classic. Texas A&M beats Notre Dame. Is Notre Dame toast for the college football playoff? And a lot more to get to. So let's kick this off, Alex. I want to start with Cowboys-Giants because this might have been one of the most exciting games of the week. Back and forth game, goes into overtime, a bunch of lead changes. Nobody could stop anybody. Russell Wilson jumped out of the DeLorean. It looked like vintage Russ from his Seattle days. I haven't seen him play like that in a long time. Granted, he made a terrible mistake late in the game to really give the game away there late with a pick, but really big time performance for him. But here's my big concern if I'm a Dallas fan. The defense looked terrible. And look, I trust that Dak and this offense is going to be pretty decent this year, but I'm really starting to question if this defense is going to be good at all. They could not get a consistent pass rush. The secondary was alarmingly bad. Diggs was terrible. The safeties, Hooker, Wilson, out of position consistently throughout this game. I know they get the win, but I'm not thrilled if I'm a Dallas fan watching this.
I'll start with Dallas first. Donovan Wilson is really a glorified linebacker that's playing safety number one. So that's first and foremost. I'll say that there about the back end of the defense. The other part is I think a lot of what we saw in this game was the fact that Dallas was up here for the start of the season against the Eagles, and then they came back down and played to the level of the Giants. Russell throws one of the best deep balls in the league right now, and as you saw with him and Malik Neighbors twice, that he can still get it down there perfectly and drop it right in the breadbasket. But I agree that Dallas does. I think there's this give and take that they're having right now as Marshawn Nealon is now taking on more snaps and then trying to figure out the right combination of those edges to get some pressure there, to take some of the pressure off that back end, to your point that I still think may still have an issue. Diggs is still injured. To be fair, like he wanted to play in that Philly game on purpose. So he got himself ready. He might have rushed back a little bit too soon. Deron Bland got the new contract. Kenny Clark is now in the middle. So I think there's a little switch in terms of what that defense looks like. And I think I think around maybe week 6 or 7, we'll know where they really are if they've kind of calibrated to not having that big time pass rusher. On the other side, I'll say this really quickly: fantasy owners, start getting Cam Scatterbo ready because he's getting more carries than Tyrone Tracy. I don't know what happened to Tyrone Tracy between last year and this year. We know that left tackle is out, as well as, even though Evan Neal hasn't been great, he's still a starting guard. He's been out, and that offensive line goes from 31 to 22 when just Andrew Thomas is playing, and it goes to about 18 when Thomas and Neal are playing. So there could be some issues there on that side why that offense has kind of been up and down. But Dallas going to score a lot of points. They're going to have to score a lot of points the first half of this year until that defense calibrates.
What was alarming is this Giants offense is terrible. I mean, they don't put up points like this on anybody, and they just absolutely torched this Dallas defense. So that's a bit alarming if I'm a Cowboys fan. But for the Giants, I expected the defense to be a lot better. 2 weeks in, they have not been impressive at all, and this was the worst possible outcome for New York. Russell Wilson plays good in a loss, and all that does is delay Jackson Dart becoming the starter for a bad Giants team that needs to be looking to the future. Let's talk Bears-Lions here because this was kind of a shocking outcome here. We know the Lions are a lot better team, especially on paper. Expected to be maybe a little bit closer, but the Lions flexed on the Bears in this game. 2 weeks into the year, where is Luther Burden? Where is Loveland? This is a guy they drafted ahead of Tyler Warren, a guy we had graded higher at the tight end position. And Tyler Warren looks like an absolute stud right now for the Colts. And these two rookies that were supposed to be impact players day one have not done anything for this offense. The Bears' defense has been alarmingly bad. Now, look, like I said, I know this is a good Lions team and a good Lions offense, but man, that was a really, really poor performance by the Bears.
There's been a lot of rhetoric about Caleb. But to your point about Loveland and Burton, well, combined, they only have 6. They only have targets, 3 each, and they both caught 2 passes. So this may be more about opportunity. I've said, even if you go to last year, Brad, I said that Caleb is ignoring Cole Kmet. And this guy's basically a top 10, maybe even top 7 tight end previously under Justin Fields. So we know he can play. I believe that there is I watch Greg Cosell. I love watching Greg Cosell because he's very objective. He talked about the mismatch between the player and the OC. Ben Johnson likes a very structured offense. Caleb, from what we know in college, plays best when he's off script. So even though both players may have a high grade on what they do, they don't match in terms of what it is. So either Caleb has to grow up, among other things, because we're just talking about on the field. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening off the field where the leaders of that team went and said start Tyler Bagent last year. So we'll put that to the side. Or Ben Johnson needs to start curtailing it so that maybe he can bootleg some things to get Caleb on the outside so he can have some of those off scripted plays that we saw that were great plays at USC.
When we look at these first 2 weeks with Ben Johnson, Caleb has been better on script.
Yep.
He's gone 14 for 21, 191 yards, 2 touchdowns when he gets the ball out between 2.5 and 4 seconds. On script, on time. To your point, what Ben Johnson likes to do, it's why Jared Goff was so good in this offense, because that's what he wants. He wants it to be 3-step drop, get the ball out, 5-step drop, get the ball out, getting it to the playmakers on time and in rhythm. And that hasn't been Caleb's biggest strength coming out of USC, but it's certainly where he's playing his best is when he plays in that structure. When he goes off script and extends plays, that's when it hasn't looked very good for the Bears, which, like you said, is kind of odd because that's where we saw the most magic from him at USC was when he was doing that. So, look, this is a work in progress, and I don't know if Williams is an ideal fit, to your point, for Ben Johnson's offense. I think a guy like Jared Goff, a guy like a Kirk Cousins type of quarterback is probably more what he's looking for, to be honest. But he came here for a reason, and it was because of Caleb Williams. He knew he had a special player that he could help mold into a great quarterback, and I still think they will, but I'm wondering if Ben Johnson is being a little too rigid with his system, and maybe he needs to adapt it a little bit and shape it around his quarterback a little bit more going forward. Let's shift to another NFC North team that looks unbelievable right now, and that's the Green Bay Packers. I want to jump back to this Thursday night game because the Packers really just outclassed Washington in this game. I felt like this was a coaching mismatch on both sides of the ball, offensively, defensively. The Commanders just looked like they were 2 steps behind. Defense right now for this Packers team is the real deal. And I know we're only 2 games in, but this defense is flying around and making plays. They've got guys at every level of this defense. They bottled up Jaden Daniels, and I thought they had such a great game plan to keep this guy in the pocket. Don't let him escape and make those big plays. Because, look, Daniels is a very good passer, don't get me wrong, but his legs are his superpower. That's when he opens up lanes and gets loose and really starts making big plays down the field.
Yeah, and his legs, and key emphasis on his legs as he's now injured, I believe, with the MCL bruise. So we don't even know if he's going to be able to play Sunday against my Raiders. But I will agree with everything said now, and I wish that some of the conversations that we have on the side, Brad, can be on air because I said verbatim they're going to spy him with Quay Walker, and that's what you heard all throughout that game is Quay Walker with that speed, the linebacker from Georgia, the young linebacker from Georgia that was all over the field. And once again, it's another week of Micah Parsons going against a top 5 or maybe even top 3 left tackle. He did it to Penei Sewell the first week 1. He now did it to Larry Tunsil in week 2, and even broke through double screens on Larry Tunsil's side. So this way that he's being played, about 30 to 45 snaps a game, is working. I don't think he should go to full time until they're playing one of those big time games where they're going to need him to play about 60 snaps, which is usually about the most snaps you get on the defensive side. Playing him sparingly and then keeping him healthy, because the one thing we know about Micah Parsons, as you get past week 10, he starts to slow down. He start that those guys bearing down on him start to slow down. But on the Packers side, again, great game plan. They exploited the middle of the field with Tucker Kraft, who had at one point had more receiving yards than the entire Commanders offense. But I will say this about the Commanders: if you going against teams, you're gonna have to start to have some balance. They only had 12 rushes by, I'm discounting the runs by Jaden, but by the actual running backs, they only had 12 rushes, and now Austin Eckler is gone for the year. Keynote: Austin Eckler, before he got hurt, was getting more of the touches than the rookie that everybody's been talking about, Ja'Cory Koski Merritt. he was
Bill.
getting numbers. Yeah, Bill, right? Bill, as they call him, correct. But he's been getting Eckler was on the field more. And I don't know. Usually with rookies, what's the number one thing that they lack is pass protection. So I don't know what was going on there. But now that Eckler's out for the year, it's his job to lose. Once again, another fantasy. If he's on your wire, go pick him up.
Yeah, real quick, I'll comment on that because I did notice early in the game, Bill missed a blitz pickup. And I noticed quickly after that, Eckler came in the game, and we really didn't see him come back. The rookie, that is, we didn't see him much in the second half. But I also think they kind of panicked, to your point about the offense, went into a lot of empty sets, a lot of 5 wide, and just completely abandoned any chance of the run. They were acting like it was a route when really that game was within reach. It was kind of odd the way they shifted and just completely put everything on Jaden's shoulders. And I really didn't like the game plan at all for Washington in that game. It kind of played right into what the Packers wanted. But look, real quickly before we move on, Packers offense, I think, is playing well too, though. And I like the balance I've seen from them. And I really like what I've seen from Jordan Love because he looks like he's playing with a ton of confidence. And you're right, Jaden Daniels has been taking some big hits. And this is one of my biggest concerns for him coming out of LSU. He's not a big guy. We know he's a great runner and a great athlete, but he takes a lot of unnecessary hits. He's got a slender build, and he can be a bit reckless as a runner. Now he's banged up, and that's definitely a concern. Now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a long-term injury, but that's something to watch for because they're going to have to find a way to protect him better, and he's going to have to protect himself better when he's out there. Now, look, I haven't put out my first power rankings yet, but right now the Packers would be number one. I think right now they look like the most complete team in football, so really impressive win for them. And before we move on, week 2 game ball is going to go to Micah Parsons because this guy was unstoppable. 8 tackles, 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits, 5 quarterback pressures, and like you said, only playing about 40, 45 snaps, completely controlled the game and really set the tone for this Packers defense.
Yeah, you know what? Since you mentioned that, mine is going to go to since we already did the Giants Cowboys game. Mine's going to go to Dak Prescott. A lot has been talked about this gentleman, the $60 million for at least the first 2 games. He's shown up. He hasn't been the reason they lost, but he's definitely been the reason. Had they won that Eagles game, he would have been definitely a big part of that.
I want to briefly talk about the Steelers Seahawks, not so much the game, but just what I saw from the Steelers, because I think they're in serious trouble. I'm getting the feeling this team is really not very good at all. This defense is alarmingly bad. They look terrible 2 weeks in. First week, they get shredded by a bad Jets team, gave up 31 points to Seattle. And this is a Seattle offense that couldn't do anything versus the 49ers in week 1. The O-line looks bad. Rodgers is scrambling around way too much for a guy his age. They have no run game to speak of. And speaking of a run game, Caleb Johnson, where is this guy? Nowhere to be found. Has a terrible play in this game that cost them points. And look, I had heard some reports from some of the beat writers that he didn't look very good in training camp, and he hasn't done anything so far early in the year. So I think there is some serious red flags around the Steelers team right now.
Why is Caleb Johnson, who runs basically a 4.6 returning kicks? That's my question number 1.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. He's a power running back. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. All right, let's get to a game. It was America's Game of the Week on Fox. A big matchup, Super Bowl rematch, Chiefs, Eagles. Look, this was another rough outing for Mahomes in the passing game. And this has got to start to be concerning for this team because this offense has become almost entirely dependent on quarterback scrambles. They can't run the ball consistently with the running backs. Their wide receivers can't separate. That they've got a tight end who, look, he's past his prime. He makes plays here and there, but he's not the go-to guy that we saw in years past. And the offensive line, I think, is really a big issue here. I mean, Mahomes is under pressure consistently. I think there's some real concerns here because this is starting to carry over here. This is more than just a trend. It's continuing into this year. They talked about how they wanted to be more explosive on offense, but I just don't see it. Now, I know they're going to get some players back, but I don't think that's going to be a magic remedy for this offense when they get guys like Rashee Rice back and some of these guys healthy. I just don't know where they find offense at this point. They're going to have to win games with their defense and find ways to just claw and scrape out wins because this is a surprising 0-2 start for them.
I said it during the first game. Patrick Mahomes missed Tyquan Thornton. They missed on a touchdown pass. They didn't necessarily miss on the touchdown pass here, but to your point, Travis Kelce dropped a touchdown pass that went for an interception. This game should have ended 24-20 if just by happenstance everything played out the way that it is and they don't get that interception. But it should be 24-20 because that was in the red zone. It usually you expect the guy who we know is going to the Hall of Fame to catch that and just go into the end zone and blow a kiss to Taylor up in the suite. But he dropped it. Not only did he drop it, it got intercepted. At some point, the front office has to look at themselves and look at what they've done at the running back position. If you want to go all the way back to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, retread. Kareem Hunt, good player when he was with Kansas City. He's really more of a backup now. He's a retread for them. But this is a guy that they re-signed. Pacheco runs like a Marion Barber. He's going to get hurt just given his running style. They don't have any speed in the backfield. When you look at, there's nobody that pops in that running back room. So there's going to be some issues there until they get that running game right. At least last year they were able to get some tough runs and tough it out. But they, to your point, 66 yards by Mahomes, you can't expect him to do that all year.
No, you can't. And I mentioned it last week. They've missed on a ton of draft picks. If you go back, they have missed on so many draft picks in the last 4 or 5 drafts. It's starting to really show up on this team. They just lack depth. They lack playmakers. They have holes on this roster. Thankfully, like I said, the defense is still pretty good, but I think there's some question marks with them because, look, they got shredded by Justin Herbert in week 1. They couldn't make some key stops versus the Eagles in week 2. And what really is alarming was with just over 7 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter, the Chiefs are only down 10, and Andy Reid punted on 4th and 4 and basically ended any realistic shot at a comeback. To me, that was so eye-opening, and it really tells you how he feels about this offense, that he punted in that situation, because we know in years past there's no way an Andy Reid offense would have punted in that situation. And it really just felt like they were waving the white flag at that point. And I'm starting to wonder, honestly, Alex, if maybe it's more than the roster itself, which I don't think the roster is great anymore. But Andy Reid's offense, I think, might be getting a bit stale because he has not been able to provide Patrick Mahomes those 5 to 7 layups, as I used to call it, 5 to 7 schemed up easy passes that he used to get in years past. You could watch any Chiefs game, turn on it in the past. There'd always be about 5-6 plays every game where there's just a wide open receiver because Andy Reid just drew something up and called it at the perfect time to give Mahomes an easy play to move the sticks. We're just not seeing those right now from this offense. This KC offense right now, quite frankly, they don't scare anyone. In this 0-2 hole and the AFC West getting better, it's a little bit alarming for the Chiefs right now. Now, I'm not writing them off. Look, I'm not getting
the Chiefs.
I'm not getting the shovels out just yet, but I do think it's a bit alarming the way they've started the season. They've got to get things turned around quickly here because, like I said, with this division getting a lot better across the board, they can't afford to start too much slower here. They're going to have a big hole to get out of. And speaking of which, in the AFC West, we had a showdown, Monday Night Football, doubleheader, Chargers, Raiders. Chargers moved to 2-0, and they've got 2 big wins over AFC West teams, obviously knocking off the Chiefs in week 1. Now they pick up a big win against the Raiders on the road. This defense has been really, really good so far. They picked off Geno Smith 3 times. Look, quite frankly, it probably could have been 4 or 5 times. He forced throws into tight windows a whole bunch in this game and really got away with a few. This could have gotten even uglier. LA kept him out of the end zone. I mean, they only give up 3 field goals in this game, and there was a few different times where it looked like the Raiders were going to move the ball into position and maybe get this game back within striking distance, and LA and that defense just continued to make big stops in this game.
Yeah, Darian Henley, who was all over the place, a guy that I said, listen, I'm still standing on what I said. The Chargers are coming in last place because I wasn't impressed with the Chargers. Sorry, y'all weren't impressive. Because the first interception, it was a tip ball, so I'm gonna let that go. The other 2, absolutely bad throws. We got into the red zone. He threw one of those bad interceptions. What happened was Jermaine Pratt dropped a wide open interception that was an errant throw by Justin Herbert in the fourth quarter. We would have gotten the turnover. Because what happened on the next play with the Chargers? Max Crosby caused a fumble, and then we would have had a chance to win the game. So the Chargers haven't been impressive to me with the Chiefs win. I mean, we'll call it impressive because it was the Chiefs, so I'll give credence there. But that team has a lot of holes in it. For us not to have a running game really, and Brock Bowers basically being reduced because of the knee injury, this, to your point, it should have been a lot larger. But they're not the team that I think they are. So I'm not impressed with the Chargers. They'll still end up in last place.
Yeah, we'll certainly see about that, Alex, because right now they're playing pretty good. And the secondary, I think, has been one of the bright spots that I know you had question marks about. But Dante Jackson, Tarheeb Still, Derwin James, I mean, these guys have been lights out in the back end. And Deion Henley looks like an all-pro at linebacker.
Yeah.
This guy 2 weeks in, man, he flies around and makes plays all over the field. Herbert played well. Like you said, he had one errant throw, but for the most part, he played a pretty clean game. This defense looks really good. And man, they're big up front. They get a lot of push. That Raiders offensive line really struggled. Geno Smith was under a lot of pressure in this game. I think they're going to be a tough out in the West. I know you're not buying in on the Chargers yet, but I think this is still going to be a tough out for anybody this year. The other Monday night game, man, this was a fun game too. Look, low scoring, but I don't mind. I'm old school. I like close games like this. I thought this was a really fun game to watch. Buccaneers, Texans, Baker Mayfield, man, this guy continues to impress in that Bucs uniform. He led an 11-play, 80-yard drive, capped off by Rachaad White's 2-yard touchdown run with 6 seconds left. He had that 15-yard scramble on 4th and 10 that to keep that game-winning drive alive. This guy is an absolute dog, man. How fun is he to watch? What a player, what a game. And look, 4 straight years now that the Bucs start 2-0 for Todd Bowles as the Bucs head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, I'll start on the Houston side. We said what the problem was going to be coming in. They didn't do anything with the offensive line. There was pressure up the middle from Vita Vea. Unfortunately, they ended up losing Calais Kelly. He's gone for the season and he was a part of that. He was a part of that pass rush. Nick Chubb is still chugging away the best that he can, coming off, I guess, what is this, probably his like third, bad knee. So to even see him on the field is good for him. They're just having problems doing anything, getting anything down the field whatsoever. Now their defense is always going to keep them in games, but to your point, on that other side of the field, Baker Mayfield is a dog. He's exactly what we saw in college. Walked on the 2 teams, become the starting quarterback, and he's showing the same grit that he showed in college. He's showing it here now. And the loss of Liam Cohen going to the Jags as head coach doesn't even seem to phase him. They actually even look better than they did the previous year. A lot of that probably has to do with Emeka Buka and starting Bucky Irvin out of the gate as they didn't last year. So you asked me last week about them winning the Super Bowl. Does he look like a Super Bowl quarterback? Yeah, he still does. And this team plays inspired, and Baker Mayfield is an incredible leader.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I think Bucky Irving, Rachaad White might not be a number 1, but he's a pretty good 2.
Absolutely.
And when you've got those 2 together, you've got a pretty formidable running game. So it's a balanced offense. Todd Bowles' defense is always going to be good. He schemes some things up in this game to really get pressure. He was going to bring pressure. That's what he does. He brings pressure again and again and again to get quarterbacks rattled. That's exactly what he did to Stroud and this offense for the Texans. You're right. That offensive line, he saw a weakness and he went after it in this game. But there's also one key thing to this game where I saw some major coaching that didn't even get discussed on the broadcast. Todd Bowles let them score there late at the end.
Yes, that was genius. Yes.
Absolutely genius. And look, DeMeco Ryans is a very good young head coach, and I think he has a really bright future in this league. But the veteran coach made the smart move there, and the young coach and DeMeco Ryans didn't even realize it and how big that play actually was to give his quarterback a chance to come back late and win that game. And it's exactly what happened. So tip of the cap to Todd Bowles and the Bucs off to a great start.
And before you move on, Brad, real quick, let's remember this team is also going to get Chris Godwin back at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that's a veteran weapon for them that still can make a lot of noise. Like you said, Ibuka looks like a Rookie of the Year candidate right now. So I really like what I've seen from this team. That defense gets after it. Not a lot of holes on that Tampa Bay Bucs team right now. I think they're going to be a tough out in the NFC. I want to talk Colts Broncos really quick because this was a really good game. This was a back and forth game. The Broncos, though, man, when they go to watch the film, they've got to be sick because it just felt like they gave this game away. First, they missed a 42-yard field goal that could have locked up the win late. Then the Colts miss a 60-yard field goal at the end of the game. But Denver was called for a leverage play on the long snapper, so they're going to move it up 15 yards, easy redo kick to seal the comeback. Just got to be a punch in the stomach for the Broncos. I got to give hats off to Daniel Jones, though, once again. This guy is making a legit case for comeback player of the year. I know it's early, but 316 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt. So this is not a dink and dunk offense. He's getting the ball down the field and making plays, and he did it against a very good Broncos defense. So I was impressed with his performance. I've been really impressed with that Colts O-line. Only gave up 1 sack. And look, Jones never played behind a decent O-line in New York. And it's amazing how good we're seeing this guy play now that he's getting protection. He looks like a different player right now in Indy.
I don't feel sorry for the Broncos. Hey, listen, I had to, as a Raider fan, I had to live through the tuck rule. So you get to live through this leverage play that I think gets called like 1.7%, over the last 3 years. So they have to deal with it. And once again, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep saying it. Sean Payton doesn't love to run the ball. They ran the ball 24 times at 5 yards a clip for 118 yards and a touchdown. Run the ball more. It's obviously that there's a little bit of Bo Nix struggle there, even though, he had only one interception. I think it was a tip ball if I'm not mistaken, but still run the ball. Look at the tempo of the game. You don't have to. He threw 32 times and only ran 20. Balance it out a little bit more and trust your defense. The same thing you did when the Saints won the Super Bowl. You trusted the run game and you trusted the defense. Stop trying to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. It's not necessary. Let your defense do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, to your point, especially late in the game, they got away from the run. Because early in the game, they had pretty nice balance. But then late in the game, he goes back into Sean Payton mode, and you're right, gets completely away from the run game, and it ended up costing them there late in that game. They need to get back to a more balanced offense for sure because, look, that's what Bo Nix had at Oregon. They were a balanced attack, and that's when he was playing his best. And we've seen when he has a run game to go along with him, he's a better player. It sets up the play action. It takes away the pass rush and just really helps take some pressure off of him. So I completely agree with you. I want to briefly talk about this Vikings-Falcons game, Sunday Night Football game. Look, we've seen 8 quarters out of JJ McCarthy, and 7 of them have been terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. And look, I'm not trying to beat up on the kid. He's a rookie. Well, essentially, right? Okay, he missed his rookie year, but he's essentially a rookie. He's a young guy. I actually have seen some throws that were encouraging. You can see what the Vikings must have seen when they drafted him, the potential. But now he's hurt, unfortunately for him, with an ankle injury. Reports I'm reading, it looked like 2 to 4 weeks he could be out. And Alex, it's got me wondering here, do they get on the phone and call Kirk Cousins? Because we see Kirk Cousins sitting on the bench here in Atlanta. I know there's a big price tag attached to that. If they can find a way to possibly make that work, because this might be the perfect excuse for them to hit the pause button, not give up on JJ, but maybe hit the pause button on JJ McCarthy, because this is a team that won 14 games last year with Sam Darnold. They have to believe that they have the roster and the coaching that a guy like Cousins could get them back to that level.
I'll say this one note about Atlanta. Thank you, Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson, finally running the ball. 16 carries for Algiers, I believe, and then 22 for Bijan for 218 yards. So finally, run the ball. But in terms of what you're talking about with the Vikings, I don't know, because Carson Wentz is there. I think they're going to give Carson Wentz a go and then make a decision from there.
Yeah, I'd be picking up that phone. I don't know if I trust Carson Wentz at this point. I think I've seen enough of that movie to know how it ends. But, we'll see. I mean, look, Kevin O'Connell is a great play caller. He's a great offensive coach. He has a way of elevating quarterbacks. Wentz is a veteran at this point, so maybe he can keep things afloat for them. It'll be interesting to see, though. Jags, Bengals, I don't have a whole lot of takeaways as far as the game itself, except what really stood out to me, and when I was taking notes on this game, this is now 5 straight games with an interception from Trevor Lawrence. He threw 2 in this game, probably should have been 3 or 4. He had one that was dropped right in the defender's hands. Terrible throw. That play where he runs 5 yards past the line of scrimmage and then throws the ball and then argues about it. Where is the situational awareness from this guy? And that's not the only time we've seen this. There's been a bunch of plays like this from him that just leave you scratching your head saying, what are you doing out here? It's costing his team points. It's costing his team games. I have not seen any progression from this guy at all. I've actually seen regression from him. And then what was that moment where his coach, Liam Cohen, is saying something to him on the sideline? I don't know if it looked like he might have been a little upset about something, but look, he's the head coach. He has the right to be. I don't know what was said there, but for Trevor Lawrence to just blow him off and wave him off there, I hate the optics that I see from Lawrence and this team. Look, I don't think this franchise is headed in the right direction at all with this guy. And I also will say this, from what I have heard, Liam Cohen is not going to put this guy on a pedestal because he was number 1 overall pick. If this continues, he is not afraid to bench this guy and move forward with somebody else.
Right. And let's be clear. Trevor Lawrence coming out had one of the big time grades up there next to the Andrew Lucks and the John Elways. But what was the biggest knock on him? Does he love the game? 2 years ago, I went on a whole tirade about him throwing the ball away on a fourth down play in the game that would have put them in the playoffs. So you're right, Brad. This isn't the first time we've seen him. Now, I will say, I think Liam Cohen, he needs to run the ball a little bit more too, because if you're getting these issues coming from, this wasn't a back and forth game. This was a 31-27 game. And we'll get to the other side of the ball and what's going on with their quarterback situation in a moment. But they could have run the ball a little bit more. And then the second thing is they need to really, and I said this in the beginning of the season, you need to really lock down and give Travis Hunter a position. And I said primarily on the defensive side of the ball. You got Brian Thomas, you got Brendan Strange, you got Parker Washington, you got Christian Kirk. You have a bunch of guys at wide receiver. You can ease them in there for a play or two, but this guy should primarily be on the defensive side for right now so he can get some reps and start playing.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think he certainly has the talent to play both ways. However, as a rookie, I'm completely with you. I think you're putting too much on his plate. Give him one playbook, give him one side of the ball to really focus on, become great at one thing first. And then maybe year two, you start sprinkling in some of the other side. Once he feels like he's up to speed at an NFL level to be a high-level starter at wide receiver or DB, I'm kind of with you. I would kind of lean corner as well. But whatever it is, just go with it and say, look, we're going to develop you on this side, let you become a high-level player there, and then we can start working in a package of plays, maybe a few packages of plays on the other side of the ball. Because right now, he's spread too thin. You're only getting about 50% of what he's capable of doing because he's playing half the snaps on one side and half the snaps on the other side, which, look, it's incredible that he can do that, but I don't think it's ideal as far as maximizing the value of this young player for sure. Now, you wanted to mention the other side of the ball, and I know where you're going here because the other quarterback, of course, Joe Burrow, gets hurt again. And look, I started looking up. I was curious when this happened, Alex. I went back and looked up all the injuries that this guy has had because it's starting to pile up here, Alex. And this is starting to become a serious issue for a guy that really hasn't been in the league that long. To have this many injuries is so concerning. And if you go back, so I got the full rundown here. He had a wrist fracture at Ohio State. He had torn rib cartilage at LSU. Torn ACL, PCL, MCL, and meniscus his rookie year, dislocated finger in 2021, MCL sprain in 2022, a calf strain in 2023, torn wrist ligament in 2023, and now he's got the turf toe injury in 2025 is the latest setback. That is a long list of things. Now, look, he didn't miss time for all of those, but it just kind of illustrates the history that he's had with being injury prone. And it's a real issue right now for this team. I hate to say it, but the name that people are starting to say out there and putting it out there is Andrew Luck. I keep hearing, is this the next Andrew Luck? And I really hope not, because we know football is a lot more fun to watch when this guy's out there on Sunday. But I'm really starting to get concerned that this guy's career might never actually become what it should be with all these injuries and with their lack of ability to be able to protect this guy. This offensive line continues to be an issue, Alex. They've improved the O-line with draft capital and free agency. I mean, they've literally tried to improve it, I should say, but it hasn't gotten any better.
So then to me, you've heard me say this a bunch, Brad, at some point, you have to look at the coaching. Go find Mike Munchak. Go get whoever. Go find Orlando Pace, Walter Jones, and Anthony Munoz. Bring them all in because, especially Anthony Munoz, being that it's the Bengals, like you have to do something here because you sign Orlando Brown, like you said, a bunch of. They brought in Alex Kappa. They brought in Ted Karras. So they've addressed the offensive line the best that they could with high draft picks, high-level free agency. This now is on the coaching. And the one thing I do want to mention, Jake Brown is a very good backup. We saw that he had to knock off some rust, so he threw some interceptions, but he did win that game for the Bengals. He's in the last year of his contract. This is a guy that's going to hit the market and somebody who's going to be looking for a starting quarterback that may give them a 1-year contract. And I would not be surprised if it was the Rams. I know it's a good quarterback room and we'll talk about it more during the summer, but this is a guy that's a young guy that seems he can spin it. I don't know. This is a guy that could be one of those guys that's a backup that can end up being a starter somewhere.
Well, look, we had an Ohio State and Cincinnati Bengals beat reporter on this summer talking about these teams. And I think one of the most shocking things that he told us was he goes to all the Ohio State games, media credentials, of course, and covers the Bengals as close as anybody. And he said that the scouting department had what, three scouts in their entire scouting department. And he had never seen any of them at a single Ohio State game. So you have a football factory in your backyard, which has produced, by the way, a ton of really good offensive linemen over the years, and you haven't even looked at them. It's alarming the way this franchise is being run right now, and it kind of makes me think back to Carson Palmer forcing his way out of Cincinnati, a guy who just got so fed up with the dysfunction of that franchise. He finally just had to force his way out. I'm starting to wonder how much patience Joe Burrow has with this franchise at this point, because look, they've got him some weapons, but not much else. He's got a bad defense and a bad O-line, and I think there's some question marks about the coaching, to your point, because they clearly have missed on draft picks, and they haven't been able to develop draft picks either. So yeah, it's a major problem, but you're right. Jake Browning is probably one of the best backups in the NFL right now, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of keep them afloat here. But I think the chances of them being a legit contender this year, I think just went up in flames. All right, let's shift gears here, Alex. College football week 3. Man, we had some big-time matchups. We had some instant classics. Georgia-Tennessee. This one lived up to the hype. Number 6 Georgia knocks off number 15 Tennessee in overtime, 44-41. Almost 1,000 combined yards of offense in this game. Check your defense at the door. This was not your brothers or your dad's SEC matchup here, man. This was a shootout in Tennessee. The Volunteers had a chance to win this game in regulation. They miss a 43-yard field goal with 7 seconds left. That left the door open for the Bulldogs. They take it into overtime, get the big win. Incredible game, incredible atmosphere, back and forth game. Look, this was the game of the year so far in the SEC. And as of right now, Alex, the SEC still runs through Georgia.
I'll speak about Tennessee really quick. How crazy and well is Tennessee playing after getting rid of the second best prospect, or at least the second best quarterback in that high school rankings coming out? Because Nico has now quit football after getting blown up by New Mexico. But Tennessee's here playing Tennessee to the brink after cutting loose of a guy of that stature. So, turnabout is fair play. But as of right now, to your point, it still runs through Georgia. I know we're going to talk about the other team that we thought it should be running through, but right now, Georgia still looks like the team to beat. However, the SEC is shaky, and it looks like at any point in time, Georgia can fall, as we saw in this game.
Yeah, it's wide open. This isn't the days of Alabama where you've got a bunch of good teams and one dominant team at the top. Heck, this isn't even the days when Georgia had back-to-back national title runs and you had a good SEC, but you had this dominant Georgia team at the top. Because, look, this is not that type of team. This is a good Georgia team. Don't get me wrong. A very good team. But they're not that dominant pre-NIL Georgia that could just stack 5 stars 3 positions deep. They still have a good team, and they still have a really good coach. They're going to be tough to beat. But you're right. Anybody can knock off anybody in the SEC this year. Heck, even Vandy looks tough. So it's been a new world in the SEC these days. But look, Josh Heupel now 0-4 versus Georgia. That one had to sting, though, because he had Georgia on the ropes and couldn't finish them off. Before we move off this game here, I got to give out my college football week 3 helmet sticker. Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton. Look, this is a guy just last week I was questioning. I was saying on this podcast, I think he's limited. I don't know if they have enough on that side of the ball for him, to take this team where they want to go. He answered some big question marks in this game. Huge performance, 23 for 31, 304 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, plus a rushing touchdown. Look, like I said, the defense really didn't show up in this game. He had to be great, and he was. He made huge plays on 3rd down. He led Georgia really to this big road win in a hostile environment. All right, let's shift to another SEC team. Texas A&M took on Notre Dame at Notre Dame, another instant classic. What a huge win for the Aggies, and maybe a program-changing win for Texas A&M. Notre Dame ends up botching a snap on an extra point late in this game, ended up being the difference in this game. Look, we had Carter Carrolls of 24/7 Sports. He covers Texas A&M. We had him on this show over the summer, and we talked about this team. I left that interview with Carter thinking that Texas A&M is a legit dark horse in the SEC. This was a team that I was circling, a team that could maybe sneak up on some teams this year, and they look like they are at the very least, a threat, Alex, in the SEC. They have the passionate fan base, check. Incredible home field advantage, amazing facilities, check. They play in a major conference, check. NIL resources like you can't believe, and they're committed to spending them in order to win, check, 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 check. This program for a long time now has been a sleeping giant. The one missing piece was the head coach, and I think they might have just found their guy.
Yeah, big win for Texas A&M. You know, to the point you said, I think I remember saying it to you, Brad, at the watching that game. I said Notre Dame's going to lose this game. I was just looking at the flow of the game. I think I said that in the first half. I said they look like they're going to lose this game, and ultimately, even if they hit the extra point, I still think they would have, lost that game no matter what eventually. And to your point about Texas A&M, they have two big games, really on their schedule as of right now. They face LSU, and then they face Texas the last game of the season. Now, we're going to talk about that Texas team soon, but that LSU, and we're going to talk about LSU in a moment too, but as of right now, they're firmly in a collision course to see what they and Georgia do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you're right about that. And look, they might be better than Texas. I know we've got a long ways to go, and we're going to see where Texas ends up here. They're still a really talented team, but this Texas A&M team, they're looming right now in the SEC. Now, real quick before we move on, Notre Dame, this was not just a big loss to start 0-2. And look, this is a tough loss because this is 2 weeks in a row where they played a really good opponent and came up just light. A couple plays here and there late in these games, and Notre Dame could easily be 2-0. But unfortunately, they're on the other side of it. So now they start 0-2. And this is the problem for Notre Dame. Their schedule is so weak that even if they run the table, which they certainly could, and I think they're going to be favored in probably all these games coming up, even if they finish 10-2 with no conference championship game and possibly not having a single win over a ranked team, even at 10-2, they can miss the college football playoff. So these two games could come back to haunt this Notre Dame team.
Yeah, and remember, they can't get above fifth, right? So that puts them down in the bottom five when it's only a group of 12 right now. Now the thing is, they better hope USC continues to show something, because they do have that team coming up as they always do annually. But if USC happens to fall off, they're not making the cut. They won't be even a bubble team.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right about that. Georgia Tech, Clemson, big upset win for Georgia Tech. Look, Clemson looks like, I don't even know if it's debatable. I think they easily look like the most overrated team in college football this year, at least from the preseason coming into the year. This offense is struggling. And when I say struggling, I mean they're absolutely terrible. They are 112th. I'm going to say that one more time. 112th in scoring in the FBS right now. They've been terrible on that side of the ball. Cade Klubnik, look, forget first round pick. He doesn't even look remotely close to an NFL quarterback at this point. What a dramatic fall for this team from the expectations that we had coming into the year. All that returning talent, all those NFL players up front on the defense, none of it means anything right now because their season is already going up in flames. But look, I want to shift to the other side before we move on, because this is a big win for Georgia Tech. This is a program-changing type of win for them as well. I just mentioned it with Texas A&M. These are the kind of wins that can shift your program to a new direction. Quarterback Haynes King. Man, we talked about Baker and being a dog. This guy's a dog. This guy is a dog. He is tough, poised, smart, great decision maker, gritty, just a tough leader for this football team. Look, he's not the most skilled quarterback. I get it. He's got limitations. But if you want to talk about a guy who's tough, smart, and gets it done, this is absolutely the guy. And hats off to Brent Key, the head coach at Georgia Tech. He has given this team an identity, and they are certainly just like their quarterback, tough, smart football. This is the team that could legitimately, Alex, I think they could win the ACC.
I was just about to echo those thoughts as well. And my helmet sticker goes to Haynes King. 20 or 20, 211 yards passing, and then another 103 yards rushing and a touchdown. Yeah, so they're looking like the real deal. They're going to run the ball. They know who they are when they come. And, we have our good friend Quick, who's a huge fan, who plays college football 26 the same way his team plays in the league. But again, to your point about Clemson, I don't know what's going on over there. That Kate Klubnik came in as a top 3 QB prospect for the NFL. And this guy has completely fallen off of the map. That defense keeps them in games, but they're only allowing 19 points, but they're only scoring 19.3 points. That's not a recipe for winning. We know that there's about 3 or 4 guys on that front seven that's probably gonna go in the first 2 to 3 rounds off that Clemson defense next year. But they're doing that offense is doing a disservice to what that defense is doing. And
Yeah,
shout
look,
out to Georgia Tech. They're number 18 now. They're ranked 18th now.
yeah, absolutely. And I got to give you credit. You picked Georgia Tech to knock off Clemson last week on the podcast. So shout out to you, Alex. That was a great upset pick by you. Couple side notes here I want to get to, because LSU's offense, look, they beat Florida, but this offense is what I'm most concerned about, Alex. Now, the defense looks great. They have clearly fixed that side of the ball. We talked about the new defense coordinator coming in and changing things up, and it has certainly shown. They've got a lot of transfers that came over. They've got some new players and obviously some guys that are just playing at a really high level on the defensive side of the ball. But I don't think this is a team that can make a legit run at a national championship with this sputtering offense. Now, I'm not saying they can't figure it out. They still have time to, but I have not seen anything that I expected from a team that had Garrett Nussmeier coming back, has one of the best offensive minds of college football. I expected a lot more from this offense, and so far it has not looked very good. This has been a defensive-led team that has a really thin margin of error because of the offense.
Yeah, well, one thing I'm gonna say, I think they're throwing the ball too much. I know that Garrett Nussmeier led the league last year in attempts, but I think they need to balance it out some more, specifically to the point that Nussmeier's injured. And now they're finally bringing it to light that he's been injured all season long with that whatever the torso injury that he has. On the other side, since I'll just talk about my Florida Gators, the defense played well to the point that you said their offense is sputtering a little bit, and it probably has a lot to do with his work when he has to throw the ball. He can't get the velocity or things that he wants. But, 5 interceptions, the defense kept you in the game, and you couldn't do anything in the second half. It's just a disgrace, and I'll keep saying it until one of them comes to the team. Pause. Lane Kiffin or Deion Sanders. Take your pick. I'll take either one.
Yeah, it's certainly over for Billy Napier. I mean, I think we know that at this point. I don't think there's any chance of him saving his job. It's been a mess. It's gone completely off the rails. And look,
Again, it's going up.
Yeah. Except this time, I don't think he's going to get a late season surge to try to correct it and try to give the fans hope. I think at this point they've given up on this team. And to your point, DJ Lagway, look, we know this is a young quarterback, a former 5-star guy who has a lot of talent, but he has not learned how to play the position at a high level yet. And those 5 picks were so costly because, look, they lost by 10. If he doesn't give the ball away almost a half dozen times, they probably win this game easily. But yeah, that was just an awful performance by him in the offense.
And just real quick, we face Miami, Texas, and Texas A&M in a row next. So he might not. He's definitely not going to last. I expect him to be fired before Halloween.
Yeah, it's not looking good. Not looking good at all for the Gators. Now, it's also not looking good for Arch Manning right now, and I think it might be time to hit the panic button. Now, I'm not talking long term. I'm not giving up on him long term. I still think he can develop, but it's time that people pump the brakes on the Arch Manning hype train. And look, and I'm guilty of it, just like a lot of people. I expected more from him coming in this year. I thought he'd be playing at a different level than he is, but right now he just looks like he's lost some confidence. He doesn't look like the guy that we saw last year when he came in spot duty, came off the bench, and looked like he was ready to play. In these games, you're seeing him miss a lot of throws that are there. His mechanics look off at times, which is really alarming for a guy that has Manning on the back of his jersey. And like I said, he just looks like he doesn't have the same level of confidence. I don't know if it's the media coverage and the hype, the pressure, maybe it's getting to him. I don't know. I mean, it's one thing when you play like that against Ohio State. Okay, we give you a little bit of a pass. But now he's going up against lesser competition, and we really haven't seen the improvement that we expected to see from him. These were supposed to be kind of tune-up games going into the SEC play, and I'm a little bit scared for this Texas offense now from what I've seen from him. Texas is 12 of 42 on third down right now. Look, that's alarming. because we know there's some tough games on that schedule coming up.
Well, I feel no sympathy. Like Peyton Manning said when they were watching the game, they thought he was adopted by the throws that he was throwing. So I know he's getting it at home, pause. But I will say what I said last year. Sark and the Texas brass, this is your fault. Quinn Hewitt should have never been brought back. You should have started the clock on Arch Manning last year. So when he got to this year, he wouldn't be going through these growing pains now, and you could be sitting firmly in a seat to be playing for the national championship. You're Texas. You have a Manning. You can recruit any wide receiver in the world to more than likely come there, unless they just dead set on going to wide receiver U right now, which is Ohio State. Sorry, LSU, but this is your fault, Texas. You started the clock too late, so now you got to deal with his growing pains. I don't think he's going to be bad forever. I think by maybe week 6 for them he'll look a lot better. But these are the growing pains you're going to go through. You did it to yourself, so deal with it.
And that is a great point. Look, guys, if you enjoyed the show, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.